If you can fix that beast of a Caterpillar 797F, I'll pay you $100,000. Serafina's challenge cut through the freezing wind at the mining site, her words sharp as the metal surrounding them. The massive haul truck loaded with critical respiratory equipment modules sat dead just yards from the export gate. Its yellow paint was dulled by years of hauling tons of earth and rock. But tonight, it carried something infinitely more precious medical equipment that would determine whether people lived or died. Carter, a black single dad in his mid-30s, adjusted the strap of Amara's backpack on his shoulder, his dark brown hands stained with grease that had worked into the creases of his palms and beneath his fingernails. His eyes fixed on the countdown timer glowing on his phone. 2 hours and 17 minutes until the weather window closed completely. 2 hours and 17 minutes to move equipment across 43 miles of mining roads that would become impassable once the full force of the blizzard arrived. Clinton laughed from behind them, his voice dripping with contempt. He stood with his arms crossed, surrounded by a small group of workers who fed off his authority like remoras following a shark. A single black dad trying to fix a 797F. This ought to be good. Maybe he'll ask the truck nicely and it'll just start working again. The crew left on cue, their mockery echoing across the frozen ground. Carter crouched low, pressing his ear close to the engine block, listening to something no one else could hear. His body went still with the kind of focused attention that came from years of training, from understanding that machines spoke in frequencies and vibrations that told stories of stress wear and imminent failure. He stayed there for nearly 30 seconds. His breath forming small clouds in the cold air, his expression unreadable. Then he stood slowly and spoke quietly, barely above a whisper, but with absolute certainty. Everyone stepped back. If anyone tries to start this engine right now, it's about to blow. Oh, and he knew exactly how bad that could get. The remote mining operation sprawled across the desolate landscape like a scar on the earth. Its internal haul roads connecting directly to the highway now blocked by a blizzard somewhere in the northern pass. The site operated 24 hours a day under normal conditions, its floodlights turning night into an artificial orange day. But tonight was different. Tonight most of the equipment sat idle, the usual roar of diesel engines replaced by an eerie quiet, broken only by the wind whistling through the skeletal frameworks of the processing equipment. Tonight was what the logistics team called a golden window. A shipment of emergency medical equipment, ventilators, oxygen modules, and air filtration systems had to reach the regional hospital before the weather lockdown took effect. The hospital's existing equipment was failing. A respiratory virus outbreak had pushed their intensive care capacity beyond breaking. Without these replacements, patients would die. Not in abstractions or statistics, but in real time with families watching helplessly through observation windows. With the main routes impassable, the convoy had no choice but to cut through the mining access road using the Caterpillar 797F to handle the super heavy load across the treacherous terrain. The 797F was not designed for delicate cargo transport. It was built to move 400 tons of rock and earth through conditions that would destroy lesser machines. Its tires stood 12 feet high. Its engine generated over 3,000 horsepower. It was a beast that existed to dominate geology itself. Carter was a heavy equipment mechanic working on contract, the kind of technician the permanent staff dismissively called a wrench monkey. He showed up with his daughter Amara, a 7-year-old black girl with asthma, because he had no one to watch her. The school had closed early due to the weather. The babysitter he sometimes used had her own family emergency, so Amara came with him as she often did, a small presence in a world of massive machines and dangerous work. She sat bundled in this cab of his battered pickup truck wearing her pink winter coat that was starting to get too small for her long braids tucked under a knitted hat, her warm brown cheeks flushed from the cold. She clutched her inhaler in one mittened hand, her eyes wide as she watched the giant machines move in the darkness. Carter had given her a tablet loaded with educational games and her favorite shows along with strict instructions. Stay in the truck, keep the doors locked. If she needed him, flash the headlights 3 times. Carter spoke little. He worked with methodical precision that bordered on obsession. He wore the correct gloves for each task, switching between insulated work gloves, chemical-resistant gloves, and cut-resistant gloves depending on what he was handling. He locked out power sources in proper sequence, always following the tag-out procedures even when others skipped steps to save time. He always positioned himself upwind when dealing with fuel or hydraulics, a habit that prevented exposure to toxic vapors. Those who paid attention noticed something else about Carter. He examined stress points and hydraulic lines the way someone might who had witnessed catastrophic failure, who had seen what happened when corners were cut, when maintenance schedules were deferred, when profit margins took priority over safety protocols. His eyes would linger on weld joints, on pressure relief valves, on the wear patterns of cables and hoses. He saw things others missed because he knew what those failures looked like when they killed people. Serafina arrived at the site in a black luxury SUV that looked absurdly out of place among the mud and machinery. The vehicle was spotless, its finish gleaming even under the harsh industrial lighting. She was the chief executive officer of the emergency logistics coordination firm responsible for getting the medical equipment to its destination. Her reputation was built on ice and precision. She had climbed to her position by being smarter, tougher, and more ruthless than everyone around her. She made decisions in minutes that others agonized over for days. She cut through bureaucracy like a scalpel through tissue. She traveled with her assistant, Audrey, a young woman in her late 20s who managed schedules with military efficiency. Audrey carried 2 phones, a tablet, and a laptop. She could pull up supply chain data contract clauses and weather reports within seconds. She was Serafina's eyes and ears, the person who made the impossible logistics work. Serafina faced pressure from 3 directions simultaneously, and each direction carried the weight of potential catastrophe. The hospital needed the equipment immediately. Dr. Chen, the head of critical care, had called Serafina personally 3 hours ago. His voice had carried the exhaustion of someone who had watched too many people die. He had 15 patients on failing ventilators. Without replacements, some of them would not survive the night. The government contract included penalty clauses that charged by the minute for delays. For every 60 seconds past the deadline, Serafina's company would lose $15,000. The financial damage would be severe, but the reputational damage would be worse. Government contracts were the backbone of her business model. Failure here would cascade into lost bids, terminated relationships, and competitors smelling blood in the water, and her board of directors was waiting for any misstep to remove her from the position she had fought so hard to secure. 3 of the 7 board members had opposed her appointment. They had wanted someone with a more traditional background, preferably someone who played golf at their club and laughed at their jokes. Serafina had won the position through sheer competence, but her opponents had not forgiven her for it. They watched for mistakes the way hawks watched for movement in tall grass. Clinton managed the mine's transfer operations, a man in his early 50s who had risen through the ranks by knowing whose boots to lick and whose throats to step on. He treated every interaction as a contest of dominance. He enjoyed making others feel small, particularly those he deemed beneath his station contract workers, temporary staff, anyone without a company badge and benefits package. He collected slights and insults like ammunition, storing them up to deploy at maximum humiliation. Hillary oversaw security and compliance, a woman whose entire career was built on transforming problems into someone else's fault. She was brilliant at documentation, at creating paper trails that protected management while exposing workers to liability. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who knew that in any dispute, the person with the better lawyers and the more complete records would win. Always ready to suppress problems by assigning blame elsewhere, she had turned crisis management into an art form. The operator assigned to drive the 797F tonight was a man in his mid-30s with 12 years of experience operating heavy equipment. He was skilled, respected by his peers, and normally unflappable. But tonight, he was visibly shaken by the truck's unexpected failure. His hands trembled slightly as he checked and rechecked gauges that refused to make sense. He knew his reputation rode on this delivery. One major screw-up, and he would be the operator who lost the medical equipment contract. Finn, a young apprentice mechanic at the site, barely 22 years old, watched Carter work with growing fascination. Finn had gone to technical school, earned his certifications, and thought he understood heavy equipment repair. But watching Carter move around the 797F was like watching a concert pianist compared to someone who had learned from internet videos. Every movement had purpose. Every check followed a logic that Finn was only beginning to understand. George, a state trooper responsible for the internal mining roads, had been called when the safety incident was reported. He was a veteran cop who had seen enough industrial accidents to know that when big equipment failed, people died in ugly ways. He approached the scene with the caution of someone who understood that mining sites were places where gravity machinery and human error combined to create widows and closed caskets. William Serafina's legal counsel waited on standby for the inevitable complications. He sat in his downtown office monitoring his phone, surrounded by reference books on contract law liability and regulatory compliance. He had already drafted 3 different versions of press releases, each designed for different failure scenarios. His job was to protect Serafina and her company from the legal and financial consequences of whatever disaster was unfolding at the mining site. When the massive Caterpillar ground to a halt, Clinton made certain everyone heard his announcement. "We've only got Carter, but he's just a single dad playing mechanic." The words were designed to humiliate, and there was an extra edge to the way he said them, like a black man with grease on his hands couldn't possibly be the one to save them. Serafina checked her watch, her expression frozen. "I don't have time for failure." The Caterpillar 797F stood a mechanical giant, its tires taller than a person, its engine powerful enough to move mountains of earth. Now it sat silent and inert, blocking the only route that could save lives. Serafina walked to the base of the massive truck, her heels clicking against the frozen ground, and looked directly at Carter. "If you can get it running to full load specifications, $100,000. Clinton immediately transformed the offer into a spectacle. He called the crew over, started recording on his phone, his face lit with cruel amusement. "Let's watch the single dad work his magic." His tone suggested this was entertainment, not an emergency. Carter did not react to the money or the mockery. Instead, he asked a series of questions that surprised everyone listening. What exactly was the load carrying? Were there any temperature-sensitive modules? When was the last scheduled maintenance for the hydraulic system, electrical system, and air brake lines? Had anyone accessed the electronic control unit compartment today? Serafina felt a flicker of surprise. Carter was not guessing or posturing. He was diagnosing with surgical precision. Carter moved to the side of the truck, his nose picking up a faint, acrid smell near the engine housing. He instructed Finn to disengage the load chock the wheels and isolate the power supply in proper sequence. Hillary immediately intervened. "You don't have authorization to open the control compartment. This equipment is under regulatory oversight." Carter's voice remained level. "Then call the fire department and have them stand by, because this isn't a simple breakdown." Movement from the pickup truck caught Serafina's attention. Amara cracked open the door, her small voice calling out, "Daddy." Carter turned, his expression softening for just a moment. He signaled for her to close the door, handed her noise-canceling headphones, and pointed to the safety line painted on the ground. Amara retreated, her trust in her father absolute, even as fear flickered in her eyes. Serafina watched the exchange for the first time that night. Her facade of control wavered. She saw a black father trying to protect his daughter while solving an impossible problem. And she recognized something uncomfortable in that moment: vulnerability, responsibility, love. Carter crouched beside the engine block again, listening with the focus of someone reading a language written in vibrations and heat. When he stood, his voice cut through the murmurs of the gathering crowd. Everyone needs to step back. If we try to start the engine right now, this thing could explode. The words hung in the frozen air like a death sentence. Clinton's face darkened with rage. He pushed past several workers and confronted Carter directly. "You're stalling because you can't do the job." "Finn, start the engine. That's an order. Don't listen to some outside contractor." Finn hesitated, his hands hovering over the controls. The pressure of the timeline, the weight of Clinton's authority, and the uncertainty of the situation collided. He made the wrong choice. His hand reached for the ignition. The electrical system made a sharp crackling sound, followed by a brief flash of sparks near a bundle of wiring and hydraulic hoses. A thin stream of smoke began rising from a junction point. A high-pressure line shuddered with abnormal vibration. Amara screamed from inside the truck. Audrey gasped, and even Serafina took an involuntary step backward. Carter moved with startling speed. He yanked the main circuit breaker, cutting power to the entire system. He grabbed a specialized fire suppression canister and deployed foam directly at the heat source. His movements efficient and practiced. His voice cut through the chaos with commands that had the precision of trained emergency response. Lock down the load, chalk all wheels, shut down auxiliary systems. Everyone watching understood in that instant. Carter was not just a mechanic. He operated with the discipline of someone who had worked in high-risk environments where hesitation meant death. The immediate danger passed, smoke dissipated, the heat signature cooled. Serafina's voice, when she spoke, carried new authority. From this point forward, everyone follows Carter's instructions. Clinton opened his mouth to object, but Serafina's glare silenced him. Carter returned to the engine compartment with Finn's assistants carefully examining components. He found the first clue almost immediately. A sensor wire had been cut with precision, the edge too clean to be accidental damage or wear. Then he noticed a bolt in the electronic control unit housing. The thread pattern was wrong, suggesting someone had opened the compartment and reassembled it hastily with whatever hardware they had available. Carter straightened and met Serafina's eyes. Someone deliberately sabotaged this truck. The question you need to answer is whether you want to save the shipment or cover up a scandal. Hillary moved quickly, pulling out a tablet and beginning to type. "I'm filing an incident report. Unauthorized contractor intervention caused a safety event." She started photographing Carter's oil-stained, dark hands near the control compartment building, a visual narrative of fault. Serafina felt the pull of institutional power. Audrey leaned close and whispered the calculation. If the incident could be blamed on an outside contractor's unauthorized actions, Serafina's company would avoid liability for maintenance failures. But if Serafina defended Carter, she would have to confront her own leadership team, her board, and possibly the media. Carter cut through the political maneuvering with brutal simplicity. "I can fix this, but you need to lock down this site and preserve all camera footage right now. If you don't, by tomorrow morning, I'll be in jail for something I didn't do." Serafina looked at Amara still huddled in the pickup truck, her small hands pressed against the window. The child was terrified. The father was standing between his daughter and a machine that could kill them all, and he was asking for nothing except fairness. Justice balanced on the shoulders of a single black dad, while corporate power decided whether to crush him. Carter began outlining his approach. He was not going to perform a quick patch job. He would work on 2 levels simultaneously. First, make the truck safe enough to operate under load within the time window. Second, preserve evidence of the tampering to identify whoever was responsible. Finn watched in amazement as Carter called out specifications from memory and predicted component locations without consulting manuals. This was not the skill set of a basic mechanic. This was engineering knowledge. Carter pulled another piece of evidence from beneath the chassis frame. A small tracking device, commercial grade, the kind used for asset monitoring. He held it up for everyone to see. If this stays attached, whoever planted it will know our position at every turn. Serafina's assistant, Audrey Cross, referenced the device serial number against procurement records. The tracking unit had been ordered as part of an internal security upgrade, a purchase order signed by Hillary. Carter faced the gathering crowd and made his position clear. I don't need the $100,000. The statement landed like a bomb. Everyone had assumed Carter would do anything for that kind of money. Clinton actually laughed, certain this was some kind of negotiating tactic. If the truck makes it on time, Carter continued transfer the full amount to a pediatric respiratory equipment fund specifically to support hospital ventilator programs for children and do it without using my name for publicity. Serafina felt something shift inside her chest. She had built her career on calculated transactions. No one had ever forced her to choose human decency over corporate advantage in real time with witnesses and consequences. She nodded slowly. I give you my word in front of everyone here. Amara's voice carried from the truck, small but clear. Please don't challenge my daddy anymore. Serafina walked to the pickup and crouched beside the window. I'm sorry, sweetheart. Carter returned to the 797F and addressed Finn directly. Now we do this by the book. Every single step, one mistake, and we all die. The engine turned over with a deep rumble that vibrated through the frozen ground. The Caterpillar 797F lived again, but Carter's trained ear caught an irregularity in the harmonic resonance. The problem was not completely resolved. He insisted on a controlled test run within the mining yard, checking brake response, hydraulic pressure, and load distribution. The first application of brakes revealed the secondary issue. The truck's stopping distance was longer than specification. Carter's diagnosis was immediate. Someone had tampered with the air brake system, likely introducing a slow leak or restriction in the pressure lines. A pickup truck with obscured license plates began following the convoy as they prepared to leave the mining site. Carter noticed immediately and instructed Audrey to contact George. We have a potential traffic safety violation in progress. Possible stalking behavior. The internal mining road was treacherous under the best conditions. Tonight, with wind gusting and a mix of mine dust and light snow reducing visibility, it became a gauntlet. The convoy had to navigate a section where the road curved along a steep drop-off. Carter radioed Finn with precise instructions. Maintain steady speed. Do not brake suddenly. Use engine compression and staged reduction to control descent. Finn followed the guidance with shaking hands. The trailing pickup truck made its move, throwing a piece of metal debris that struck one of the support wheels on the 797F. Finn saw it happen and shouted. Carter had anticipated some form of attack. He had already identified a pull-off area that provided defensive positioning. He directed the convoy to that location. With the truck temporarily secured, Carter went underneath again. He worked with incredible speed, Finn passing him tools in rapid succession. Serafina stood in the wind holding Amara's hand, shielding the child from the worst of the cold. It was not something a chief executive officer typically did, but nothing about this night was typical. Carter extracted a component from the brake assembly and held it up. This wasn't casual sabotage. This was planned to create a fatal accident. Serafina began putting pieces together. Audrey verified that the tracking device procurement was authorized by Hillary. Records showed Clinton had repeatedly pushed to delay scheduled maintenance to reduce costs. The pattern was emerging. Serafina felt the weight of her own decisions. She had signed off on budget cuts that deferred maintenance schedules. She had prioritized quarterly earnings over safety margins. Carter looked at her and spoke with devastating accuracy. A signature in a boardroom can become a coffin on a highway. But Carter did not weaponize his judgment. I just need you to make the right choice this time. Serafina struggled to breathe normally. For the first time in years, she confronted the human cost of abstract corporate decisions. George radioed in with new information. His equipment detected signal interference along the route. Someone was coordinating the harassment remotely, which meant organization and resources. Carter turned to Serafina. Whoever planted that tracker is very close to you. Probably someone on your payroll right now. The 797F developed a resonant vibration under heavy load. Finn panicked. Nobody can diagnose that kind of harmonic failure without advanced instruments. Carter spoke without thinking. I designed this system. The words escaped before he could stop them. Silence fell across the radio channel. Finn stared. Serafina's eyes widened. Carter's history emerged in fragments, not in a confessional monologue, but through necessity. He had been a senior engineer in a project that improved heavy equipment braking and load management systems. He left the industry after a haul truck accident killed his wife, a black woman named Naomi, whose smile still lived in every memory he had. The investigation revealed that cost-cutting and deferred maintenance had created the failure conditions. Since then, Carter had lived quietly, raising Amara, working contract jobs where he could keep his head down and his daughter safe. He carried a profound fear that greed and negligence would kill again if he was not vigilant. Serafina began connecting threads she had been avoiding. Her cost reduction decisions, the systematic sabotage, the tragedy in Carter's past. She was terrified of the conclusion forming in her mind. That her company's practices contributed to the accident that destroyed Carter's family. The trailing pickup returned, but this time it did not just harass. It blocked the road ahead. Carter spoke quietly into the radio. They're not here for the cargo. They're here to eliminate witnesses. In the chaos of the roadblock, armed individuals emerged from vehicles. Amara started crying, her asthma making her breath shallow and rapid. Serafina pulled the child close on pure instinct, her body shielding Amara. Carter made a decision. He stepped out of the protected position, drawing attention to himself and away from the others. He walked forward with his hands visible, deliberately making himself the target. Two men tackled him, forcing him to the ground, zip-tying his wrists. Hillary arrived with the security team, her timing suspiciously perfect. She made a show of restoring order, then announced her verdict. Carter sabotaged the equipment and created a dangerous situation. He's being detained pending investigation. Clinton produced his phone playing the video of Serafina's $100,000 challenge, but the footage had been edited, removing context and making it appear Carter had demanded payment. Look at this. The guy extorted money and then wrecked the truck when he couldn't deliver. The narrative was designed to destroy Carter, turn him into a liability, a criminal, a convenient explanation for a sophisticated operation. If Carter went to jail, if he was blamed, the real perpetrators could continue their schemes. Serafina stood at a crossroads. Defending Carter meant confronting her own leadership team, her board of directors, and potential media disaster. Remaining silent meant a father would lose his freedom. A daughter would lose her father, and the conspiracy would continue unchecked. Amara clung to Serafina's coat. "You said you believed my daddy." Her voice was small, broken with fear and hope. Serafina felt tears she had not allowed herself to cry in a decade. She saw her own ruthlessness reflected back at her through the eyes of a 7-year-old black girl. Serafina turned to Audrey. "Call William. Get every security camera feed from the site. Tonight we burn this down even if it costs me the company." William arrived and immediately demanded preservation of all digital evidence and access logs to the electronic control unit compartment. Audrey compiled documentation showing Hillary had authorized the tracking device purchase. Clinton's emails revealed a pattern of pressuring maintenance teams to cut corners and defer inspections. Carter, sitting in the makeshift detention area, remained calm. His wrists were still zip-tied, but his mind was working through the problem with the same systematic approach he applied to mechanical failures. He directed Finn to serve as a witness regarding the precision of the wire cuts. "Look at the edge under magnification," Carter instructed. "That's not fray or corrosion. That's a clean shear from professional cutters." He asked George to run forensics on the pickup truck that had harassed them, looking for organizational connections, fleet registrations, corporate ownership structures, anything that would trace back to who was funding this operation. He provided technical details that only an expert would know. The type of wire cutters used left microscopic tool marks. The thread pattern of the mismatched bolt indicated it came from a specific manufacturer's parts kit. These were signatures of professional toolkits, not random vandalism. The evidence was mounting. Every piece connected to a larger pattern. Someone with access resources and detailed knowledge of the 797F's vulnerabilities had orchestrated this sabotage, and that someone had tried to frame Carter as the fall guy. Serafina confronted Clinton and Hillary directly in front of the gathered workers. The floodlights cast harsh shadows across their faces. Clinton sneered at her, his confidence unshaken even as the walls closed in around him. So, what's it going to be, your executive position or a single dad? Because you can't have both. The board wants blood. They want someone to blame. You give them Carter. You keep your job. You defend him. They'll crucify you. Serafina's voice cut like steel through the cold air. I choose human lives over corporate convenience. I choose integrity over my career. And if that costs me everything, then so be it. Hillary tried to hide behind procedure citing regulations and protocols, pulling up documents on her tablet speaking in the language of compliance and policy, but the access logs betrayed her. She had approved equipment modifications that were never properly documented. She had signed off on maintenance deferrals. She had authorized the purchase of tracking equipment that had no legitimate security purpose. Clinton and Hillary made their final move. They attempted to redirect the medical equipment shipment to another truck, one they controlled, planning to make the cargo disappear and blame the entire incident on the chaos Carter had supposedly caused. The equipment would be lost in transit. The hospital would receive nothing. And by the time anyone sorted through the paperwork, people would already be dead. Carter heard their plan over the radio. In that moment, something shifted in him. He had spent years keeping his head down, avoiding confrontation, protecting Amara by staying invisible. But staying invisible meant letting evil operate unchecked. His wife had died because people like Clinton and Hillary put profits before safety. He would not let it happen again. He broke free from Finn's loose supervision, the young apprentice deliberately turning his back at the right moment. Carter sprinted to the loading area, his boots pounding against the frozen ground. Using proper lockout procedures he had memorized from years of safety training procedures he could execute in the dark or under pressure, he secured the valves and load locks with a combination sequence that only he knew. The cargo was now physically impossible to transfer without his codes. George arrested Clinton and Hillary on charges pending investigation. Clinton tried to run. Finn, the young apprentice who had watched Carter's integrity all night, blocked his path. The Caterpillar 797F, with Finn at the controls and Carter riding alongside, delivered the medical equipment to the regional hospital with minutes to spare before the weather locked down. Finn wept with relief, finally free of the fear that he would be blamed for a disaster he did not cause. Serafina watched the massive truck roll away into the dawn light. She looked at Carter. You didn't just fix a machine, you saved lives. Carter had one more question. Are you willing to publicly acknowledge your company's failures? Serafina met his eyes. Yes, because I owe you that, and I owe Amara that. Serafina held a press conference the following afternoon. She stood at a podium facing cameras and reporters. She admitted the maintenance deferrals without hiding behind corporate speak. She acknowledged the oversight failures that had allowed sabotage to occur. She committed to structural reforms, putting safety protocols ahead of profit margins. She announced immediate safety audits for all equipment, established an independent safety committee with veto power, and created a whistleblower protection program. Her board of directors erupted in fury, threatening lawsuits and demanding her resignation. But the evidence made denial impossible. Clinton and Hillary he faced criminal charges. If the board tried to scapegoat Serafina now, they would look complicit. The $100,000 went exactly where Carter had specified, funding pediatric respiratory equipment for underserved communities. The donation was public, but Carter's name was not attached. Honoring his request, Amara held the donation receipt in her small hands at their apartment beneath a framed photo of the beautiful black family they had once been. She read the words slowly, then looked up at Carter with understanding beyond her years. My daddy fixed a giant truck so little kids could breathe. Carter knelt and hugged her, his voice thick with emotion. That's right, sweetheart. That's exactly right. Carter was cleared of all accusations. He was offered a position as technical safety consultant with authority to enforce worker protection protocols. He accepted with one contract condition: protect the people who do the work. Don't turn them into scapegoats when something goes wrong. Serafina knelt to Amara's eye level in the hospital parking lot 3 days later, the morning sun turning snow into diamonds. Thank you for reminding me to keep my promises, Amara. The little girl looked at her seriously. My daddy says promises are important, especially when they're hard. Serafina's eyes stung with tears. Your daddy is right, and he's a good man. Amara smiled. I know. Carter watched, seeing not just a CEO, but a person who had chosen to grow and pay the cost of doing right. He extended his hand. Thank you for believing me when no one else did. She shook it firmly. Thank you for being worth believing in. The morning after the storm broke clear and cold. The blizzard had passed through, leaving the world transformed. Everything was white and clean, the ugliness of the mining site temporarily hidden under pristine snow. Carter walked out of the hospital administration building with Amara's hand in his, having just finished signing the consulting contract. As he walked, he was acutely aware, as he always was, of being a black man moving through spaces where decisions were made, not just where labor was done, but for once he felt truly welcome there. Serafina walked beside them without fanfare or cameras, just 3 people moving through a winter morning. In the distance, the Caterpillar 797F sat in the mining yard, its yellow bulk standing against the white landscape. It had been properly repaired, its systems restored, its sabotage components replaced. It sat silent, a beast that had been tamed not by force or dominance, but by integrity and expertise, and a refusal to accept negligence as inevitable. Amara looked up at her father. Daddy, are you going to fix more big trucks? Carter smiled, squeezing her mittened hand gently. I'm going to make sure they don't break in the first place, sweetheart, and I'm going to make sure the people who work on them are safe. She nodded, satisfied with this answer. Good. A small black family moved forward into the light, their breath forming clouds in the cold air, their footsteps crunching in the fresh snow. And for the first time in a long time, the single dad was not dismissed or diminished or reduced to a stereotype. He was respected, he was seen, he was valued for who he was and what he could do. He was enough. He had always been enough. Now the world knew it too.